Hello out there in Apes land. Hope you guys are hanging on and staying sane, staying connected, and getting outside to get some fresh air. And as Bay Area people, I know we've all experienced estuaries, just like we've all experienced chaparral, but maybe we didn't know it was chaparral we were looking at or an estuary. So that's what today is all about. But before we get into that, if you have not seen the flip lecture from last week about writing stronger FRQs, go check that out first. We're avoiding flowery phrases. We're not going to be vague. We are jamming in the detail as we play this game called AP Environmental Science Exam, which happens to be all FRQs this year. So we're going for the points. We're going for the win. Strong finish. So take a look at these pictures and you're probably like, oh yeah, I recognize that. If you're lucky, you recognize that from real life. This is a type of ecosystem that surrounds an estuary called a mangrove forest or mangrove swamp. That's from the Florida Everglades, but I've seen them in Central America, South America, anywhere that's tropical tends to have mangrove forests, and this is the telltale sign, these crazy root systems, and they're really important. They're a keystone species. We're going to keep our focus on the Bay Area though, because we got plenty going on here and it's local and even more relevant. What's an estuary? The estuary is the water part. It's basically where fresh water and salt water mix. And so think about what our watershed is like here in California, where we've got all the snow and rain coming on the Sierra Nevadas, and then it runs off and it goes into the delta system. And then as it comes down the delta system, it starts to get more and more salty as it mixes with the bay, right? And so if you remember, we were looking at the plight of the delta smelt earlier, because of course everybody wants that fresh water. It's getting tapped and pulled and distributed in lots of different directions and in competition with wildlife. And so it depends on your perspective. From a wildlife perspective, we need that estuary, that fresh water to flow into the bay. Not everybody agrees with that perspective though. And so anyway, that's what an estuary is, but equally as important is what's surrounding the estuary. And that's where you get the mangrove forests, or you get salt marshes and different types of wetlands, in our case. And so we're going to come back to these questions later. For right now, what we're going to do, we're not going to take notes on this one today, you guys. It's not going to be Cornell notes like we've done in the past. This time we're going to write an FRQ together. I'm going to walk you through it, and we're going to look at the scoring formats in preparation for the AP exam. We're studying. That's what's going on here. So here is the first part of your FRQ. And so you want to think about what's going to change the salinity level, the salt level in an estuary, and what would change the temperature of an estuary. And so as we write this response, you're thinking on your feet. We're not doing any flowery phrases like the estuary's good or anything like that. And we're going for full discussions, 3 to 5 sentences for each. And for this particular one, we really want to break it down so a little kid could understand it, like this guy. But we're going to keep our responses more sophisticated than a little kid could write, right? And so here it is. Discuss 2 important causes for the variation in the temperature and or salinity of an estuary. Why don't you do one of each? Be sure to include the connection between the cause and the temperature and or salinity. So go ahead and hit pause and do that, please. All right, we're coming back. And now, rather than just write the whole thing out, let's stop, take a look at the scoring format, and you can go ahead and hit pause here again and just see how you did. There's a lot of different things that would affect the salt levels, ranging from rainstorms to runoff or maybe more runoff because the wetlands are gone, or whatever it is. And so just pause, take a look at those, see how you did, and feel free to add to it too. All right, we're coming back. And so now we're back on this first screen. I want us to think about what ecosystem services are. And that's sort of in the next prompt. But ecosystem services, I think, are going to be on the exam for sure. It's a broad concept that could tie things together. And so are estuaries, which is why we're putting energy into this, because this is a vehicle that could basically bring in all these concepts together in a short amount of space to capture the breadth of the AP course. And so an ecosystem service is something that affects people, something the environment's doing for people. And so we don't want to we can talk about food webs and things like that, but as long as we relate it to people. And so what are 4 ecosystem services the estuaries and the surrounding wetlands provide? And then actually don't hit pause yet. Second question, what are 4 ways humans can negatively impact an estuary or the surrounding wetlands? So go ahead and hit pause and see what you can come up with on your own. And now I'm coming back. Did you hit pause? Did you do it? This is the point. You guys got to do the lifting. And so I made a little map of ecosystem services for both estuaries and the wetlands that surround them. And I'm just going to rattle these off really quick. One of the big ones that the wetlands serve for us is flood control. It's like, think of those wetlands like a giant sponge. And that's really important. It's like if the tide is surging and the water's coming in, the wetlands act as a sponge, and it goes the other way too. And actually for the other way, I'm going to zip down over here. Remember what phytoremediation is, like the celery. If you remember in class, we put celery in colored water, and the celery sucks up the water. And so plants will suck up pollutants and sometimes even digest the pollutants and make them benign. But it's so going both ways. Got flood control, pollution control. To the untrained eye, when you go over the Dumbarton Bridge, you're like, all these salt marshes, they look like there's nothing going on there. They're actually highly diverse systems, and they suck in a lot of carbon. A lot of productivity there. Why is that an ecosystem service? Because we're affected by climate change. And so this would be a carbon capture method. Thinking about just like all the little canals and stuff in the saltwater marshes, it's a great place for baby fish and baby crustaceans. It's a nursery. This is where they grow up. And then when they're grown-ups, we can go harvest them and eat them. Ecosystem service for people. Same breath, it's a stop for migratory birds. And why is that important for people? Well, one, we like just watching the birds, so there's the aesthetic piece. But also the birds can be, pollinators, and they're going to help out with food web stability, and we harvest that food. I'm going to pause on aesthetics here for a second. Aesthetics is one of your go-to responses for ecosystem services. Just like when in doubt, mercury or any toxin can cause brain damage. Or same thing, if you need an environmental law, boom, Endangered Species Act. You can apply it to almost any situation. Including this FRQ later. But in aesthetics, people is basically about what people like. What's beautiful to people? What do people like to do? We like it. Bird watching is huge. Some people call it the #1 sport. I don't know if it's really a sport, but people are into bird watching beyond what you probably think they are. Hiking, jogging, biking, field trips. If you were on the Cooley Landing field trip, we were at an estuary. All that stuff is aesthetics. And then, of course, we can get plants for medicinal purposes and things like that, too. Oh, and along with flooding, reduces erosion. So that's it. And so the reason I pause on this is a lot of these ecosystem services can be applied to other situations as well, like forests and that. How do we impact these ecosystems in a negative way? I'm going to let you hit pause here. The big one is habitat destruction. And if you remember seeing that map in class of San Francisco from space, the Bay Area from space, almost all of the wetlands surrounding the Bay Area that were there 1,000 years ago are gone. Which is really unfortunate. We're starting to bring them back as we recognize their importance, but habitat destruction for building homes, building businesses, building roads, making salt marshes, that's one of your biggest ones. I'll let you read these other ones as well. So hit pause if you want to. And then now we're going into the next FRQ. And I realize it doesn't say ecosystem services, but a lot of that same stuff will still apply. And so discuss, keyword discuss, 2 roles that coastal wetlands play that are ecologically important, and 2 roles the wetlands play that are economically important. So for the economically one, that's your ecosystem service. So go ahead and hit pause, keeping in mind you need a total of about 12 sentences for this one. So really make the connection, spell it out, so this little guy here is going to have an aha moment. Go ahead and hit pause. Boom, now we're back. And so let's go ahead and score that first part. Here's the important causes for, oh, excuse me. Here are the rubrics for the last prompt you just did. So go ahead and hit pause again, read that over, see how you did, make sure you have the detail in your response. Hit pause. Okay, here comes the next one. How have we negatively impacted those ecosystem services, or excuse me, those wetlands and estuaries? So go ahead and do that one, please. Hit pause. And here is the rubric for that. And so we're looking for, do you have around 9 sentences, like a paragraph there? Hit pause on that and take a look. And then we've got one last one. And this is another type of prompt that I can almost guarantee you're going to see, because you can apply it to so many different situations. So choose one of the negative human impacts you identified in Part C and explain one environmental policy and one economic incentive that could have prevented it. And so we're looking for a solution. This is where you want to have some environmental laws in your back pocket, including Endangered Species Act. And be thinking about like tax break and just different incentives for people. Go ahead and hit pause and write your response. Okay, do you have 6 sentences? Explain that and explain that. Go ahead and take a look at the rubric. You can hit pause, see how you did. And then finally, I linked this to the assignment. There are 3 sample responses that people wrote up. I got this from the College Board about this FRQ when it was actually in the AP exam. And what is interesting is that they gave us a commentary from the person that scored it. And they get really aggro about using their rubrics. And so I think it would be really enlightening for you guys to take a look at those and what's scoring points and what's not scoring points. For example, and this is just a little piece of it. It's going to get too unruly if I put it all in here. You guys can check it out. But if you read this over, you'll be like, without thinking too much about it, it'd be like, oh, it seems like a reasonable response. And then you look at the commentary and you realize why it's not scoring points. And we want to make sure we're scoring points. You guys, so to get credit for this particular flip lecture, there's no Google form, but I want you to take a picture of your notes or scan them in somehow and put that into Canvas. Of course, at this point, we're not nickel and diming points and so forth. We are going for the jugular AP exam. Let's take it down. I know the whole world got flipped upside down. This is what's in front of us. We've got a little bit of control over this, and so let's just go after it and fight the good fight. You guys keep taking care, and we'll be in touch. See you later.